Welcome, fellow horror hounds, and welcome to the latest episode of Talk and Stalk, your unholy home for horror. I'm your host, as always, Barry, and today's podcast is going to be devoted to a horror movie released in 1981 that I actually just watched recently. I'm actually quite ashamed to admit I hadn't actually seen this film until about 2 hours ago, and that is Dead and Buried. As I said, released in 1981, I realised that this film does actually have a cult following. I actually went into this film blind. I knew the basic plot synopsis, I knew what the film was about, I knew that it was directed by Gary Sherman, that later went on to direct Poltergeist 3, and I believe one of the co-writers on this film actually was Dan O'Bannon as well, who actually wrote Dark Star, which was John Carpenter's directorial debut in '74, and also wrote the sci-fi horror classic that is Alien, and also went on to direct the likes of, Return of the Living Dead in '85, and Stan Winston. Stan Winston actually provided the effects in this movie, and I'm just going to get right off the bat now and say I liked this. This was a good film. This was a really good movie, actually, and what I really like about this film is actually the setting. As soon as this film starts, it was kind of vibes of John Carpenter's 1980, The Fog. I love the whole, the coastal town, the small town setting, and this movie has a great sense of atmosphere to it. It's very dull, it's very dreary, the use of fog. It really looks like it's the kind of end of the world kind of little town, a place that you really wouldn't want to go to. And I think the director, from what I understand, intentionally chose foggy weather conditions for this film while on location in California. I think the setting was supposed to be Maine, and they look most like kind of New England, northern New England, when the weather was foggy. But there's a great sense of mood and atmosphere to this film, and the opening to this movie I thought was really good, actually. We get this guy who he's basically there taking pictures of the beach, and there's this woman who just kind of like stood there out of nowhere, and as soon as I saw her, I'm thinking something's not right here, something's definitely off. This woman, she's dressed up in this dress, and you're looking at her and she looks completely out of place for this kind of setting. And it turns into a kind of a fashion shoot. He starts taking photographs of her, and all of a sudden these people come out of nowhere. And, they bombard him, and he ends up getting tied up to a post, I believe it is, and basically burned alive. It's a really kind of horrible burning, and later on we actually find that he did actually survive. His burnt body. It's made to look like an accident, but his burned carcass is actually in the car, and we kind of get a little jump scare moment kind of with that. I just want to say that this film has James Farentino, I believe his name is, who's actually the lead star of the movie. I actually think he does a good job. And this was actually Jack Albertson's final film. Although I think he actually made a made-for-TV movie the same year, but he was really poor health during the whole of filming. He was actually suffering from cancer, may he rest in peace. And he actually died just a few months after this film's release. But he did actually get to see it, I believe, at the premiere, in which he attended in a wheelchair with an oxygen tank and mask. And I just want to say that Jack Albertson is great in this film. I'll be honest, he's not an actor I'm overly familiar with. I'm sure I've probably seen him in probably a lot of films prior to this. But he's really good in this movie. He's quite the character. He has quite a few quips. He's a man that takes great pride in his work. He's basically a coroner, and he restores the dead. And, there's kind of a little joke, kind of little thing early on in the film that kind of brought a smile to my face, where he basically kind of talks about this young lad that's working there, dealing with cannabis, smoking cannabis and all that. Just kind of a little bit, as he calls it, banter. So yeah, like I said, he's really good in this film. Now, this movie is, at its core, is kind of a zombie film, but not your traditional zombie film. We come to learn that the dead are being resurrected via voodoo. And, all fingers would kind of point towards him. I'll be honest, I was kind of like expecting kind of a twist that maybe the lead character, his name is actually escaping me at the moment, the detective, the cop, that his wife was actually involved. Now, he actually starts, quite early on in the film, starts to suspect that maybe she's having an affair. She's actually seen at a hotel with this guy that was actually on the beach, taking pictures. And then we actually kind of come to learn that apparently he sells cameras and so forth to the school, and but then it turns out, according to the principal, none of that is being sold to the school. And he obviously becomes worried that she's actually having an affair, and then he actually finds a book to do with voodoo, for example. So the film certainly kind of points its fingers at, who's actually... We come to learn that somebody is actually kind of resurrecting the dead here. And when I say this is a zombie film, it's not, flesh eaters walking around. People are dying. Now, from what I can recall, it's basically people that have suffered horrible deaths that are actually brought back to life. And spoiler alert, Jack Albertson's character is actually the man that's doing this. He's kind of playing God in a way. Very kind of like Frankenstein-esque, if you will. And in a twist, it actually turns out that the lead police officer, his wife, is in fact a great success of Jack Albertson's character, and that she was actually dead. And most of the people that have actually been brought back to life usually take a few days until they actually need to be, touched up again. Whereas her, it's months, so he actually sees her as great a success. And all of these people that have been brought back are basically given the memories for which he allows them to have. Now, like I said, the atmosphere in this film is great. There's actually some death scenes, some quite notable ones actually. Like I said, the burning at the start is good. There's actually a scene involving acid. Now, this film, from what I understand as well, was very quickly dubbed a video nasty, but then it was actually removed from that list. Now, I'm going to assume I saw the uncut edition. I actually watched this on a streaming service. I actually did watch this on Shudder. There's a very notable, acid death, and it's kind of, I love that whole kind of idea with films like, for example, with the Invasion of the Body Snatchers. It has that whole kind of, who do you trust? Who do you trust? Who's dead? Who isn't? Even the young boy, the young lad that is actually working for Jack Albertson's character, he's actually dead. Now, there's actually a scene where the lead police officer actually is involved with hitting someone, and the person manages to run off, but we see an arm. There's actually kind of a detached arm that's stuck to the guy's car, and as I said, the effects were courtesy of Stan Winston, who really needs no introduction whatsoever. This is a guy that is a legend within the Hollywood SFX industry. I mean, this is the man, as I said in a podcast just a little while ago, in fact, on Pumpkinhead. This is the man that gave us the Alien Queen, Terminator, Predator, the T-Rex from Jurassic Park, among many, many others. And he really does have some great effects in this film. And from what I can understand, is that Stan Winston basically utilised everything he kind of knew at that point in his career for this film. And, there's actually a scene getting back to quite early on in the film. The man that actually survives the burning, and he's actually in hospital, and he's covered kind of head to toe in bandages. And I actually believe that was all actually a mechanic, which is quite an incredible feat. I think that the full body cast was actually, it was a mechanical dummy, which was actually built by Stan Winston. It was very lifelike, and the elaborate movements, the dummy was rigged to make, gives the appearance that it's a real person. And I'll be honest, it fooled me. It did actually fool me. And again, another notable death is the needle eye stab as well. And another great effect is actually the arm that's actually on the front of the car as well. A great effect. And, at the start of this movie, like I said, we see all of these people gathering together. They all kind of like almost appear out of nowhere. It's really kind of weird. And there's actually a moment in the film where a family, they stop off for gas, I believe it is. And they go in there and, you've got all the locals and that in there. And the barmaid was actually introduced earlier in the film. She's one of the people that's actually involved in this. And then what we get is where they actually go into a house. They're looking for an ice pack. There is a collision. Something runs in front of the road. And they go in there. And there's this great kind of scene, actually. We're in this house. And it's a really kind of creepy atmosphere. And then, of course, we see these shadows kind of move across the window. And they're obviously being stalked. And there's actually a moment I really like where one of the people, one of the mob, we'll call them the mob, actually comes in through the window and actually says, welcome to... I've actually forgotten the name of the town now. My brain has actually gone dead. He actually comes smashing through the window and actually says, welcome to... It's something Bluffs. I've actually forgotten the name. But yeah, I love that whole kind of like scene. And it's, as I said, it's that whole kind of aspect of paranoia with these kind of movies, which does kind of like hark back to kind of Invasion of the Body Snatchers, but in this movie it's not alien creatures, it's actually it's reanimated corpses. And as I said, Jack Albertson's character is essentially playing God. He, in a way, he sees it as a kind of a challenge. These people are suffering these horrible deaths. And it's the challenge, because he prides himself so much on his work, he really does, that he, the more horribly murdered they are, the more of a challenge it is to kind of make them look like they once did. And of course, none of his creations he wants to bury. These people are, the way he looks at it is that these people can no longer get sick, they don't have the worries that the living have, and they're far better being dead, walking around dead, than they ever were alive. And obviously, the lead character actually comes to the realisation that his wife is actually involved, and she was actually involved in the murder. Now, this is what I saw coming. There is actually a twist, in a way kind of tacked on, if you will, but the lead character is in fact dead himself. Which, again, kind of also asked me the question, because obviously they can only have the emotions, presumably, that Jack Alberson's character, Mr. Dooley, actually gives them. So, this guy actually reacts much to it, and obviously there's a lot of emotion from him throughout the course of the movie. So, presumably Jack Albertson would have actually given him all this. But, it's a twist. It's a twist. I mean, there's very kind of like almost EC horror comics vibe to this movie as well. As I said, the setting really kind of like stands out in that. But yeah, there's that final twist. We see this man being brutally stabbed to death. We obviously don't see the person. And as soon as I saw this moment, I thought to myself, I bet it's him. I bet he's actually the victim. Obviously doesn't realise he's dead, because it was making me wonder whether these people actually realise they're dead. But there was a scene a little earlier where the man was actually, again, the young character, was actually brushing himself up with makeup paint or whatever it is, what coroners use. So I'm thinking, yes, they do actually know that they're dead, and they're starting to decay. And basically, he's their master. Jack Albertson's character is actually their master. He actually, I believe he has to remove the heart from each of these victims in order to actually attain control of them, and the hearts are hidden, and we actually come to realise that the heart of the lead character, the first character that's actually killed in the movie, it's actually buried in the coffin with him. Because we do actually see, there's actually a moment that kind of made me laugh a little, where he actually walks out of the house, and the police officer is actually out there taking photos of him. Because, he doesn't believe. There's a guy that comes to him a little earlier in the movie that actually tells him that, this guy's alive. He's like, he's dead. He's not, seriously, it can't be him. There must be a guy that looks just like him that's actually walking around. So, yeah, I mean, from what I also understand as well is that Gary Sherman, the director, had actually originally intended this movie to be a dark comedy. I mean, it's certainly by no means a dark comedy. This is a film that's actually quite bleak, really. But really, it's kind of like I said, there's very kind of like Frankenstein aesthetic to kind of the motivations, if you will, of, Jack Albertson's character. And I also found out that basically Gary Sherman purposely avoided letting the colour red be visible in any scene. So the sight of blood during the murder sequences, which are generally quite memorable in this film. There's actually a character, a kind of a drunken bum, that's actually the second victim in the movie, and he's killed quite horrifically. And again, he shows up later on during the film. He actually picks up a hitchhiker who herself ends up dead. And there's actually a fantastic sequence, actually. This was really well done, in which she's basically brought back to life. She's completely kind of reconstructed from the ground up. And it's a really well done scene, in fact, where her eye socket is actually opened and an eyeball is put in. And I believe like the scenes as well of Albertson's character of actually using the scalpel of these victims was actually, I believe that was actually Stan Winston's hands himself. And there's actually another scene in the film where the lead character actually takes the film reel to be developed, and the very moment he hands it over, I thought to myself, can you actually trust this guy as well? And it became apparent that no, you can't. Because we actually get a shot of his hand, and it actually turns out that he's dead. He's clearly been worked on, and I actually think there's like a scene in the towards the end of the film that's kind of moving actually in a way where he actually shoots his wife, and she actually says that she just wants to be buried. She just wants to be buried, and it kind of made me laugh actually where he's shooting her, and she's coming out with all this stuff that he could have for dinner. Do you want this for dinner? Do you want that for dinner? And it must also be noted as well, before I do forget, Robert Englund, Freddy Krueger himself, is in this film. Pre-Nightmare on Elm Street. Obviously, this was released in 1981. Nightmare on Elm Street was 3 years later. Feels really weird kind of seeing Robert Englund before becoming Freddy Krueger. I know that he was in the sci-fi cult show V, playing an alien called Willy. But, yeah. Now, I think also, this film actually made very little money at the box office, but it has actually received a lot of praise from critics, really for kind of Stan Winston's special effects in this film, and, as I say, Albertson's performance. I think he does a really good job in this film. And, like I said, I'm very kind of late to the party with this movie. I'd heard of it, had never got round to watching it, and I think this is actually a bit of a hidden gem. So I'm really glad that I actually watched it. Yeah, also, I know that this film actually made little money at the box office, but, like a lot of horror movies do, but it actually started to receive a lot of praise from critics, regarding kind of Stan Winston's special effects and Albertson's performance and that. And from what I understand, it does certainly have a bit of a cult following, and I'm very late to the party in watching it, but I actually think this film is a bit of a hidden gem, certainly. Great sense of atmosphere. It's a film that's certainly memorable. I quite like the idea of it. I like the concept of it as well. It's, I can see people are saying that this is kind of a slasher movie as well. I've heard some people say it's not a slasher movie per se, but there are certainly kind of slasher elements to it. I mean, it was released in 1981, which is very much kind of the heyday, the golden age of slasher movies, as I've said on many podcasts before. So this is probably just one of them films that kind of like got kind of lost in the shuffle upon release. But it was good. It was a really good film. So yeah, I think that's pretty much all I really want to say regarding Dead and Buried. I'm really glad I watched it, and I do appreciate the fact of people have actually recommended this film to me. So yeah, so that's pretty much it for today. Thanks to everyone that listened, and I'll be back again soon to haunt you and torment you. Take care.